Please be seated. Our sitting has resumed. When we took this suspension, we were dealing with questions. Honorable Minister, can you just give the Leader of the Opposition a chance to get into the chamber? Is it somewhat together? Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just so the honourable member asked a question about the battery, the 12 megawatt battery, storage battery at CUC, whether that was, I think he used the terms net or gross. Mr. Speaker, I guess at best in layman's terms to say that is the net and not the capacity. It's a 20 megawatt battery, and that will provide us with 12 megawatts of distributed energy. On the question on the national energy policy, on the target of 70%, Mr. Speaker, the national energy policy, I'm just going to quote the description of the target from the renewable energy generation, the RE, from the Integrated Resource Plan report. Mr. Speaker, it reads that the target is 70% of the total electricity generation coming from renewable resources by 2037. And in the strategic framework of the national energy policy, those are diesel, the combination of renewables under that chart is wind power, solar PV, waste energy, and solar PV utility scale, and solar PV distributed. So at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, the 70% of whatever electricity we are consuming will need to come from renewables.
Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to ask the member if of that 70% and by 2037, what kind of projections we did on installed capacity for, what's this, 2000? That's 17 years away.
Honorable Minister.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the projected demand on the national energy policy is about 650,000 megawatt hours.
Very Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition.
I wonder if you can repeat that number. 650 million megawatt hours?
$650,000 megawatt hours.
Honorable Minister, Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
What a growth. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if, for the sake of clarity, if the minister knows what this country is burning right now.
One moment, Mr. Speaker.
Is your question so refined that we answer immediately? You're looking at you having trouble with it. Maybe you should throw in the seat. Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, if you're having difficulty with the question, perhaps it is something that could be done in writing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I just wanted to ensure that we had the most recent and factual figures, which we're having some difficulty getting at the moment. So if the member is happy, we can produce.
Leader of the opposition.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I am comfortable with that because the minister seems to be having some difficulty collating those numbers, but I should point out to him that in the compendium of statistics, 2019 we had 668,000 kilowatt hours, and if by 2037 it's 650,000 kilowatt hours, we would have a contraction of our electrification. So, just to point that out.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I must apologize to the member because I was reading the chart on the renewables, and I do have here the forecast potential sources of electricity generation in 2037 as forecasted in 2015 is a total of 730,423 megawatt hours. That would be, and I can give the breakdown, they're forecasting that 216,616 megawatt hours would come from diesel generation, 24,528 megawatt hours from wind power, 450,292 from solar PV utility scale, and 21,900 waste to energy, which we just signed the contract on that facility recently, and the solar PV distributed would be 17,086 megawatt hours. There is the review next year. We will have the 5-year review of this policy, and those numbers will be reviewed and updated at that point.
I think we should move on to the next question.
The elected member for Newlands to ask the Honorable Attorney General. Question number 2.
The member from Newlands, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 2 on the order paper to the Honorable Attorney General, which reads as follows. Can the Honorable Attorney General please provide an update on the planned implementation of anti-bullying legislation in the Cayman Islands?
The Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the answer. On the 10th of November 2020, the Law Reform Commission, in accordance with Section 12 of the Law Reform Commission law, submitted for my attention its final report entitled, and I quote, "Bullying, Legislation, Policy, or Both," which includes a draft Education Amendment Bill 2020 and a draft Anti-Bullying Schools Regulation 2020. Mr. Speaker, the final report contains recommendations that speak to the introduction of a legislative framework to address bullying in schools, and it is supported by A, proposed amendments to the Education Law 2016 to mandate that all schools formulate an anti-bullying policy, and B, the introduction of proposed regulations that focus on 1, defining the bullying concept, 2, the formulation of anti-bullying policies, and 3, reporting, investigative, and enforcement procedures. Mr. Speaker, as this subject falls under the auspices of the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture, and Lands, the Ministry, I delivered a copy of the final report to the Acting Chief Officer of the Ministry for attention. Mr. Speaker, in terms of process, the Ministry will review and consider the recommendations contained in the final report and then determine whether it wishes to place the final report before Cabinet for consideration. Mr. Speaker, if the final report is presented to Cabinet, it is at that stage that Cabinet would determine whether to accept the recommendations and approve instructions leading towards the enactment, promulgation, and implementation of the legislation. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementaries, the member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, based on that response from the Honorable Attorney General, obviously further questions should probably go towards the Ministry and government policy. But I just had one follow-up, which was obviously the focus has been on schools, and there's no consideration of a wider concept of bullying in the community other than within the school environment. So I was wondering what led to that decision to only focus on the education institutions.
Honorable AG.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm advised that when the referral was made, the intention was to look at bullying in the school and bullying in the workplace. But the aspect of it dealing with school took on a little bit more urgency, and so the report was prepared with the main focus on the school environment. But the other aspect of it is still to be considered.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the AG, the Honorable Attorney General, could let us know whether or not the report now deals with cyberbullying as well, social media, that sort of issue.
Honorable AG.
Mr. Speaker, yes, it does. Deals with cyberbullying, defamation, and free speech and aspects of it.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will only say request at this point then, if and I know this is not the Attorney General's responsibility, but more from a government policy perspective, if the government would consider now putting some priority on getting this legislation through. More and more I'm getting reports, and I know the Honorable Attorney General is aware of one recent one, of some serious incidents involving bullying. And what I would suggest as a way forward, Mr. Speaker, is that all stakeholders now be invited to participate in bringing this legislation forward. There are many groups out there who are involved that have been formed primarily because of this, that would love to have the ear of the minister and the ministries, just so that they can have their input as well. I know that some participated in the consultation, but to move it forward and to give a sense of the urgency, if the government would consider doing that, I would be happy to facilitate as well.
Honorable AG.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly will discuss with the Honorable Minister and her team the observation of the honorable member, but as I said, in fairness, the ministry just got the report less than 3 weeks ago, and so understandably we wouldn't have had a chance to consider it as yet, but I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, in the fullness of time, we will hear more about the direction of travel that the government intends to take as it relates to this particular initiative.
The elected member for East End to ask the Honourable Minister of Employment, Border Control, Community Affairs, International Trade, Investment, Aviation and Maritime Affairs. Question number 3.
The Honorable the Leader of the Opposition, the member from East End. Question number 3.
Mr. Speaker, question number 3, standing in my name, is asking the Premier, and the question reads, can the Honourable Minister say how many complaints has the Department of Pensions received from employees regarding pensions deductions not being made to their pension plan? B, how many complaints were received during the 6 months withdrawal period? C, how many employers are being investigated for criminal prosecution as a result of the complaints? And what is the status of those investigations?
The Honorable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the answer. Presently, the Department of Labor and Pensions has 225 active pension cases which are derived from employee complaints. During the 6-month emergency pension withdrawal period, 1st of May 2020 to the 31st of October 2020, a total of 27 new cases were reported to the Department due to the receipt of employee complaints. Those cases are presently under investigation by senior officers. Currently, the Department has 15 pensions cases in summer court and is preparing charges against a further 2 employers with several others in the preparatory stages. These matters remain ongoing. It should also be noted that in 2020, the Department concluded 3 pensions court cases which resulted in the collection of the pension contributions for the employees of about Cayman Islands dollars 325,000.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister say if those 3 that were concluded in 2020 were part of those 225, and how long have those 225 been on the records?
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to get that detail.
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to get that detail for the member, for the leader. So some consultation is is going on there. I don't have the answer readily at hand. I don't know if the
Can you-
leader or any other member has any other supplementaries that maybe I can respond
There's
to in the
several
meantime.
indications of supplementaries. The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the minister say if a case have been reported but resolved in respect to the pension contributions that were not paid and subsequently paid after the ending period of the emergency pension withdrawal, does the pension department still allow those Caymanians to withdraw the amount allotted within the law that we allowed for the COVID-19 relief?
The Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think that there would be any discretion available. The law that we passed in this House, which allowed emergency withdrawal, is quite specific as to the period. So unless there was some amendment to that, I don't believe that the pension department would have any discretion in that regard.
Have a supplement.
Thank you,
The
Mr.
member from Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister say if that's something this administration would be willing to suggest in respect to amendment? Because there are some Caymanians who have been displaced as a result, even though the cases have been rectified now with the payments made, but due to the deadline being passed, they were disenfranchised from the opportunity to withdraw those monies and now still in debt and could use that money that would have been there for them to withdraw. So is that something the minister or his government be willing to consider before the ending of this administration?
The Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, certainly.
The member for Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to the Honorable Premier. With regards to question B, how many complaints were received during the 6-month withdrawal period? Can the Honorable Premier said if any of those complaints related to the actual pension providers?
Honorable Premier. The Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid I can't answer that question. I don't have anyone here who has that information. I am as unhappy about this as our members on the other side.
The member for Bordentown West.
Mr. Speaker, I completely feel bad for the Premier. I will just take the answer in writing if available. Thanks.
Agreed. Honorable Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we'll
Yes.
ensure that happens.
On the other matter, can that be done in writing? Yes, that supplementary you were discussing with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
That's fine, Mr. Speaker. But I would like to ask the Premier, and I'm sure the Premier will agree with me that taking monies from people's salaries and not submitting it to the provider in the name of that employee is a criminal offense, and it amounts to dishonesty and theft, or theft and that's under dishonest is defined under that. And I wonder if he will agree with me with that. And what about those in his supplementary to a response to supplementary from the member from Georgetown on those who have now made good on the payment, whether or not they would be able to withdraw? I wonder what happens to those who have only made partial payment in subsequent to the withdrawal period, end of October. Will they be prosecuted, or will they be allowed to continue to contribute to that backlog?
Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the department receives complaints, carries out inspections, does investigations. If they believe that there is a matter that should be prosecuted, they prepare a file, and the file goes to the DPP, who makes the determination as to whether or not there should be a prosecution.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I hear the Premier, but there has to be some policy directive within the department for a time period for those monies to be paid in. And you know I got a pension law, right? Paid into into the provider. And theoretically, the law says that payment should be made within a year. What is taking so long for these cases to come to some conclusion or sent over to the DPP for prosecution, when there has to be a time frame as to when that money must be paid? And the law requires it to be paid within 1 year. Even if there is an agreement for that payment to be made. What is the policy within the department when they get these complaints and they start investigating? Do they allow it to go on forever, trying to convince the person to contribute? That is my question. What do? We can't wait forever after someone has stolen people's money. You can't wait forever to recoup that money for the ordinary man. The case in point, Mr. Premier, Mr. Speaker, is that we got into a pandemic and the government tried everything in its power to facilitate our people not falling through the cracks. And here we are with people who didn't put any money take the money out of the contribution as a contribution to their pension and not put it in the pension plan. That is a criminal offense. And I want to know what the government is doing about a time frame for prosecution of these people.
Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, that was the question, that was a speech.
No, that was a question, kind of question.
But Mr. Speaker, I invite the Leader of the Opposition to reread the answer. That is what the government is doing about the matter. There are 27 new cases since the emergency pension withdrawal, which the member spoke about. These cases are currently under investigation by the senior officers. The department has 15 cases, is prosecuting in summary court, and is preparing charges against a further 2, with several others in the preparatory stages. So that is what the government is doing in relation to the matter. Whether matters are prosecuted becomes a decision of the DPP once the investigations are done and the files are prepared and passed to the DPP.
Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Chairman, the Premier may think that I don't have a good grasp on numbers, But he knows that one of the things I'm very good with is 2 plus 2. Mr. Speaker, 27 plus 3 is 30, and 15 is 45. Yet we have 225 cases that with complaints. I want to know how long these things are taken and what is the policy with regards to those that are proven to be so and they are given the opportunity to repay it. What is that time frame? That is my question.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know the answer to that. As soon as there is a case, or the department believes there's a case, a file is prepared and the matter is passed to the DPP and the matter is prosecuted. I don't know how, I mean, there are 225, they weren't all filed the same day. So those are the ones that are currently active. So I can't say, based on what information I have, how many of them relate to complaints made last week or last month or 6 months ago. I can only say, Mr. Speaker, with the information I have, that 27 new cases were reported to the department during the emergency pension withdrawal period.
And Mr. Speaker,
The Leader of the Opposition.
thank you, sir. I added that up, and that's 4 to 5 cases being investigated or concluded or preparing charges to be sent to the DPP. Now 4 to 5 from 225 is 180 left. I want to know where they are, how long it takes to conclude these cases. That's simple.
Honorable Premier.
Maybe it is for the leader who may have information I don't have, but I can only repeat, Mr. Speaker, what I've answered already. Those matters, as far as I am aware and have been advised, are still currently under investigation. They're not at a stage where a ruling can be made whether or not to proceed with a prosecution.
The Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr.
This is the last supplementary, and then we have one more supplementary, the member for Northside, after the Leader of the Opposition.
I'm sure the member from Northside will extend that into plenty. Mr. Speaker, my question is, I understand that the Premier is saying that he does not have the information available, but he has his staff here. Well, not his staff, but the staff from the department. Of the 180, how many of those have been given opportunity to make good on those plans, and how long has it been outstanding for each one? That is simple, Mr. Speaker. I cannot make it any simpler. How long, what is the policy in the department, in the government, on once they have determined that the person is making good, how long does it take to make up the people they stole from? And they do not get prosecuted and go to prison.
Mr. Speaker,
Can you
I say again,
add any more, Mr.
I don't have
Premier?
that information, Mr. Speaker. I know they don't have the information. That's what I said earlier. We don't have that level of detail available to me. We don't, based on this question, Mr. Speaker, it is unreasonable to expect that we would have a list of 225 cases, each one, when each complaint was filed, and what is the disposition of each and every one of those.
The member for Northside, and I'll permit one more after that.
Thank you.
I've been pressed to do that. The member for Georgetown West, the member for Northside.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He's in some rest.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Honourable Premier could say of the 325,000 that was collected during 2020, this would have involved some employees not having any pension paid for them by their employer, who were therefore unable to access the pension claims when the government changed the law. Will those persons so affected, now that the claim date has expired, will those persons so affected be allowed to claim now that money has put in their pension plan?
Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the question that was asked by the member for Georgetown Central.
I was going to ask if this wasn't
Right.
already answered.
So,
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
which I said that as far as I see, the legislation, amended legislation, does not invest the department with any discretion in this regard. And the question from the member from Georgetown Central was, would the government consider looking at that so as to see whether it is possible to allow persons who were by no fault of their own unable to claim to be able to do so. And I said certainly the government would consider that.
Thank you.
The member for
My fault.
Bud Down West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, just to wrap up that last issue there that both the member from Georgetown Central and Northside raised, I think somewhere in the law the director may have some discretion, but that's something that they can probably look at with the Attorney General. But with regards to my question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Honourable Premier, when providing the written answers, if it would be possible for the government to also just provide an update in terms of all the withdrawals that we had during the 6-month period. I know they did something previously before which was actually quite informative, and it'd be nice if the government can just at least consider releasing the total amounts and everything that was withdrawn. Thank you. Oh, sorry, no, the same, there's an update on the previous press release you had where you gave out the withdrawals by month, and yeah, that's the total amount withdrawn by month. Yeah, thanks.
Honourable Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, just to make it clear that we are more than happy and indeed intended in any event to provide information as to the total amount withdrawn collectively during this period. But we are not able to give more information than that. There will be no names of the persons who are withdrawn. There will be no reference to any pension providers. There will be no reference to employers. Just want to make clear the nature of the undertaking I'm making on behalf of the government to provide just the quantity of money that was actually withdrawn during this period.
Member for Borden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to make clear, we wasn't looking for that because I don't want anyone to see how much I withdraw either. But yeah, no, sorry. Well, no, that's why I said update the press release that you previously did before. Yeah. Through you, Mr. Speaker, just ask the Premier if he can confirm if the people who withdraw funds during the pensioner time, if that list was provided to NAU or other government departments that provide assistance during that period of time.
Honourable Premier, that was the last supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, that was the case. In fact, if the member might recollect, the legislation itself, the amending legislation, placed an onus and a responsibility on the Department of Pensions to provide that list to NAU, so that we didn't wind up with
Twice.
I'm not going to use that term, but with people getting both the benefit of the pension and and the assistance from NAU.
Yes. Question number 4.
The elected member for West Bay North to ask Honourable Minister of Employment and Border Control. Question number 4.
The member for West Bay North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I raised a question in my name. Can the Honorable Minister say whether there are outstanding permanent residency annual fees that came due between the 1st of November 2019 and the 31st of October 2020? If so, what is the total amount of the unpaid fees?
Mr. Speaker, the answer. Between the 1st of November 2019 and 31st of October 2020, 640 persons were in arrears and owed a total of $5,147,335.52 to the Cayman Islands government in permanent residency fees.
Mr. Speaker.
Member for West Bay North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, we heard evidence given here last month at PAC where a chief officer said that he was aware of public funds being used to pay for permanent residence fees for public servants. It came out because someone at the Charter Center took our money and paid for permanent residence for someone so they could get a job there, it seems. Can the Honorable Premier say whether the government intends to continue with such a practice, or is this a policy?
Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, that certainly was not and is not government policy. Government funds are not to be used and would be improperly used if they were used to pay someone's permanent residency fees.
Honorable members, before you rise, there is no need for members on my left to say, through you, Mr. Speaker. There's no need to take that time to do so. All you need to say is, what your question says, can the Honorable Minister say, Mr. Speaker, but not through you, Mr. Speaker. The member for West Bay North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My substantial question was framed around a 12-month period that ended the 31st of October 2020 because I thought it would give the government reasonable time to have its answer prepared for this December meeting of Parliament. I want to go now beyond that, Mr. Premier, and go by and ask that after the 31st of October 2020, is the cabinet considering any paper that would write off this, or that's a no-no? Some people out there in the street are saying that they're being told it's going to be written off. That's why they're in no rush to pay it and so forth. Is anything like this being considered?
What is being written off?
All this money that's owed to us.
The whole amount?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the government is not considering any such thing. A report was provided to government last month relating to permanent residency fees. It's not the first one that we've had, because we have been pressing the relevant agency to collect these fees or to take the necessary steps in relation to the matters. Of the outstanding liabilities owed to the government, work conducted a review and determined that a total of $2,094,094.27 is collectible. That is, there are no known technicalities that would allow persons to argue otherwise. That leaves a total of approximately $3,053,241.25, which presents many barriers to collection, including cases where the PR facility has been revoked or rescinded, the PR holder has left the jurisdiction indefinitely, the PR holder is now deceased, or the fees have been generated following the grant of Caymanian status. The Ministry will be seeking guidance from the Attorney General's chambers to determine the feasibility of recovering owed fees by way of civil litigation. Additionally, as a targeted effort of enforcement, the Cayman Status and Permanent Residency Board, working in collaboration with the Compliance Unit of Work, has been actively addressing those persons identified as breaching the law in respect of their financial obligations. This has resulted in approximately 50 persons being contacted and requested to attend work to collect their, what I call the minded to revoke letters. And what that means is that the board writes to individuals who are in breach, or at least prima facie in breach, and the letter says the board is minded to revoke your permanent residence on the basis that you have not paid the required fee. So it gives them an opportunity to make a case as the law requires before a decision is taken to revoke the residence. A total of approximately 87 persons have made payments during the period of 31st of August this year to 31st of October this year, with a total of approximately $506,111.25 collected. Hence, it is estimated that a total of $1,587,983.02 remains outstanding from that figure that has been identified as the collectible total. And the Work Senior Management Team and the CSPR Board are continuing to review their ongoing efforts to collect fees owed to the government.
Mr. Speaker.
Member for West Bay West.
Thank you, sir. And they cannot get their status.
Please address the chair, the member for West Bay West North.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, through you. Mr. Chair, if they don't pay this, they cannot get their status. Is that correct?
Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the board will not consider applications for Caymanian status where it is known to the board that there are outstanding PR fees. Neither will applications for naturalization be allowed to proceed if there are outstanding fees.
A member for Savannah.
Mr. Speaker, how long will you wait to find out when these funds are, if they don't pay for their naturalization, Cayman status? I mean, is there a limitation? Are people just waiting to see if they, if you might forget about it or something? It doesn't make sense. You pay or you go.
Right. So, Mr. Speaker,
Premier,
there are a number of measures that are possible to be taken in relation to outstanding fees. So if you don't pay, you get a minded to revoke letter on the basis that the board is minded to revoke your residence because you haven't paid the fees. There is also the possibility of civil litigation to recover it as a debt before the court, or, and this is usually the most effective one, you can't move on to get status or naturalization if there are outstanding fees. So obviously none of these are working entirely satisfactorily, hence the backlog that we have, but it is now a focus of work on the CSPR board not only to deal with these outstanding fees, but to put in place systems which reduce significantly the amount of money that is owed to government as a result of these outstanding, of people obtaining permanent residence. And the thing is, there are a number of categories of permanent residence, but there's one category that seems to be a much bigger problem than the other. I can perhaps provide that for the benefit of the House. So there are 6 categories of permanent residence. There is residency and employment rights certificate that is given to a spouse of a Caymanian. Currently, there's 75 persons who are outstanding, but that only amounts to about $36,700 because that sum is small. There is the residency. There is PR with the right to work as a dependent of a permanent resident. There are currently 125 persons who owe there. That's $723,365. But the big category is PR with the right to work in their own right. 413 persons, $4,082,290.52. And then there is permanent residents with the right to work as a surviving spouse of a Caymanian. There are only two of those, that's $13,850. And then there's permanent residents with the right to work as varied based on circumstances. So that's where a person has gotten PR on the basis that, for instance, they were a lawyer, but because of changed circumstances, they no longer work as a lawyer, but they work as something else. So there is 25 of those, and that's $291,130, which brings us to the total $5,147,335.52.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister say whether or not persons have been granted status or naturalization with outstanding fees owed for the PR? And the reason why I'm asking that,
I just answered that twice. Not once, but twice.
well, Mr. Speaker, I'm being told that that answer was already clarified.
Answer is no.
If that is the case, it seems something went wrong somewhere, because we now are saying that persons would not be able to get status or their naturalization because of outstanding fees, but others have been able to do that. I'm not saying you don't fix the problem, but how do we verify the fact or tell one person who eventually wants to become Caymanian that, oh, the other person got away with it, but I can't? That creates a bit of a...
I think that's called two wrongs don't make a right.
But I didn't say
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
But I think the question, honorable member, has been answered.
I didn't say
Mr.
what he
Speaker.
just said. So I didn't say what he just said. So he may be saying that, but I didn't say that.
I thought the question was answered a while ago.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't say that persons have been granted permanent residence. I mean, Caymanian status or naturalization.
I see.
The member said that, I don't know whether he has examples of it or not, but I am saying that persons are not allowed to proceed. Their applications are not allowed to proceed for Cayman status or for naturalization if it is known to the board or to the Deputy Governor's office that there are outstanding fees. I will never say that some can't slip through the crack, because as long as they are human beings handling a process, things happen. But as a general policy, you're not allowed to, your application not allowed to proceed if it is known that there are outstanding fees.
You have a follow-up, Georgetown Central?
Yes, sir. But I am more confused now than I was before. Mr. Speaker, how I came to the conclusion of or assumption that that was the case was based on the Premier's response about what is collectible and what wasn't collectible. And under the section of uncollectibles, he suggested or said that persons who were granted status or granted naturalization. So that must have assumed that they had outstanding, and it's under the collectibles section, but you can't collect it now because they are already no longer needed. That's where I got the assumption from, just for clarity. But my next question, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, can I explain that?
The Honorable Premier.
So, Mr. Speaker, that's really where there is a dispute, because what happens is that because the processes take long sometimes, and the person winds up getting Caymanian status, and then a bill is generated again for their PR. And in this interim period, they say, well, I got Cayman status, I don't owe this money. And so there is a dispute. We've actually recently changed the policy. I believe it's a regulation. It is a regulation. So that we are able to prorate, so that, because some of these fees are very expensive, right? So, some of them can be as much as $50,000 a year. Right, so if they got the Caymanian status at a particular point, they don't want to pay for the whole year because your fees are due every year. So it's that sort of situation that this is referring to, the answer is referring to when I spoke earlier.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Premier for that clarification. I have a better understanding now of where that the little shaky middle ground could come up. But it actually leads into my second supplementary, which is recognizing, as much as myself and I'm quite sure other members want to hold persons accountable to paying for being here through rights to work or the PR. I recognize that there's a certain category that the Premier highlighted that may create a bit of a problem for any administration, which is those who were married to Caymanians, but those persons are deceased. Now, Mr. Speaker, those ones are, in my humble opinion, eventually going to be able to apply for status by way of I withdraw the question, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, I was only getting to you to say, ask the question.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to ask the Premier if the government has considered tracking those who have outstanding PR fees versus those who drew down on their pension, so to speak, to see if, because all those were submitted to the government. And I'm wondering if government had considered that, and the people who drew down on their pension during the withdrawal period, if government considered tracking those to see if any of those were included in the outstanding fees for PR.
Honorable Premier.
No, Mr. Speaker, that tracking wasn't done.
It was done for NEU.
Okay.
It was done for NEU.
Honorable members, in asking supplementary questions, your chair has always been in agreement to allow a short preamble to your question, but you cannot make a speech a longer than ordinary for a question. So when I give you time, I'd ask you to appreciate it and not to think that I am cutting your time away. Because before long, somebody's going to rise to their feet and say, is this a speech or a question? The member for Northside.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Honourable Premier, can the Honourable Premier confirm that these outstanding fees are recurrent fees? Because certainly they have to pay the fee up front for the original application, like you do with a work permit. If not, could I recommend that the government consider the policy that you must pay the PR fee before you get the grant, when you make the application?
Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, yes, these are all recurrent fees. not the original fee.
Not the original fees.
Statements by honorable ministers and members of the cabinet.
None.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business. Bills. First reading. Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020.
Bill has been read the first time and is set down for the second reading.
Second reading. Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020.
The Honorable the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave of the House to move the second reading of a bill entitled the Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020, a bill for law to amend laws with respect to the citation of laws consequential to the amendment of the Constitution and for incidental and connected purposes.
The bill has been duly moved. Is the Honorable Attorney General speaking thereto?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a very short bill. Mr. Speaker, following on from events of last Friday and even before that, when this institution was rebranded or renamed or retitled as a Parliament pursuant to the 2020 Constitution Amendment Order. The government considers it only fitting, Mr. Speaker, that the citation of legislation enacted in here should carry a nomenclature, Mr. Speaker, that is consonant with the label Parliament. Thus, Mr. Speaker, we should have acts that have been enacted by the Parliament. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the primary object of this bill is to bring about a change whereby all statutes passed by this Parliament as of today will be styled acts instead of laws. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, once the bill is enacted, we will discontinue the use of the nomenclature laws when referring to legislation enacted here. Mr. Speaker, this act of switching from laws to acts would be consistent with what transpired in at least two other British overseas territories, namely Gibraltar and Bermuda, both of which now, Mr. Speaker, has Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, as outlined in the objects and reasons of the bill, laws enacted before this change would eventually be cited as acts, and the subordinate legislation, Mr. Speaker, where the nomenclature is reflected, would eventually be changed to reflect the new citation. Mr. Speaker, that's the extent of the bill, and I certainly wish to commend it to this Parliament for the consideration of honourable members and for passage.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you,
Member
Mr.
for Newlands.
Speaker. Clearly, as the Honorable Attorney General has said, this is a short bill, and there is no reason why we would object to this bill getting passed through the House. Obviously, it fits with what has been done recently in terms of I didn't want to get too excited today. But clearly it is fitting with what has changed recently with regard to our Constitution and the provisions in the Constitution. The only thing I will add, Mr. Speaker, outside of stating our support on this side of the benches of the House, is that I think I would recommend a similar exercise be done, considering all of the recent changes and amendments to the Constitution, so that we capture whatever consequential changes are required to get the full effect of those changes. There may be some benefit to the country that we may have overlooked thus far, but going through this sort of cleanup exercise would be good, just to consider all the amendments, the recent amendments, and see what other consequential changes we could put in place as a result of those. So that's just a suggestion, Mr. Speaker. But apart from that, I just rose to give the official opposition's position on this bill. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? If no other member wish to speak, the Honorable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I could not let this this bill pass without my saying something about it, given where we've come from, where we are currently. Mr. Speaker, this is, I think, all but one of the number of changes necessary to bring this institution, which is now called the Parliament, to the standard which I believe all of us believe the country deserves, and indeed our maturity as a democracy deserves. I'm grateful to the Honorable Attorney General for pointing this out to me and to the Cabinet and to his team of parliamentary drafts persons for putting it together so swiftly so that we could get it here for this meeting. In case members are wondering why we have placed it on the order paper in this order to go through the first, second, and third readings, readings, and then committee and third readings in the course of one day. It is because we propose to ask His Excellency, in fact we've already done so, to assent to the bill swiftly over the course of tomorrow, so that all other pieces of legislation which are passed in this meeting of the House will be known immediately when they are published as acts instead of laws. Mr. Speaker, the one other outstanding piece of business which I am hopeful we can still get done before this House is dissolved on the 29th of March next year is a set of modern standing orders, so that the next administration comes in equipped with a modern set of standing orders that govern the operation of this Parliament. I do not think we need to reinvent the wheel. I do not think it needs to be a massive undertaking. There are lots of good examples around, and I certainly wouldn't propose that we wander too far away from the model that we have now, but that we seek to modernize it and to improve upon the way it works. I think it's important that we all recognize that the standing orders are not intended to be hurdles to the House getting business done, to members having an opportunity to get their matters on, an opportunity to speak to them. The standing orders are there to ensure that there's proper order and fairness regardless of who's in government and who's in the opposition, so that all representatives have equal and fair opportunity to represent their constituencies, but more importantly, to have their say on matters of national importance. And I think once we understand that those are the basic principles that should guide the development of the standing orders, we should be able to get there fairly swiftly. Mr. Speaker, I think we have made some massive strides during the course of this term, dealing with issues which those of us who have been around for a while in this honorable house have long lamented and long said we needed to get done. The constitutional changes are something of which all of us can be incredibly proud. And as I've said more than once, I have spent most of my, I wouldn't say most of it, but almost all of the 20 years I've been here, we have been working on some aspect of constitutional change. The bill that we passed last meeting, which was called the Legislative Assembly Management Bill, was something, again, that we've been talking about for most of those 20 years. I am overjoyed that we have managed to get that done. It comes into effect on the 1st of January, and I think finally separates the executive from the legislature in a clean break way, so that the administration of this Parliament is no longer controlled in any way by the executive. So if, Mr. Speaker, we can, between us all, agree to get a set of modern standing orders in place, I think that we would have done well and would have served the interest of this Parliament, this country, and whoever comes to occupy these seats in the next administration and beyond very well. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I commend this bill to all members of the House, and I thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition for indicating that the opposition supports the bill.
The Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the Deputy Leader laid out the position of the opposition in support of this citation. But I am only left to say to the Premier that like him, my life has been, my political career has been consumed, the majority of it, with a number of things in this Parliament that we have not had much success. They have not come to fruition, and that makes me sad. In particular, the amendment of our standing orders. I believe I have been on every committee since 2003, I think it was. So much so that your good self, the Attorney General, the former Deputy Glidden, the Financial Secretary, and I traveled all the way to Canada, to Ottawa, and that was during 2006-07. And I can't say that my library, from which I will write my memoirs, which shall be entitled Only in the Cayman Islands, has much to do with paperwork on trying to modernize the Constitution, the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, I know you and I have had much opposition to certain aspects of the updating the standing orders when it came to electronic equipment, and I'll never forget a former member, Kurt Tibbetts, as well. We opposed bringing computers in Parliament, and we had to concede eventually, because there were more younger ones than us than they were old enough to support us, including the Premier, who wouldn't support us. Yeah, you have always been a progressive, so have I. But be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, I am here to tell the Premier that I am ready, I'm willing, and we need to get it done, regardless of whether we fade into the sunset or not. I see these young, dare I say, Turks, MPs in here now, and they struggle with trying to understand exactly what our standing orders mean. They struggle. I cannot say that I did not struggle. I struggled too, but I had the best teachers in the world. When I came here, we had so many long-standing parliamentarians that the Premier and I had very good teachers. And including your good self, Mr. Speaker, and the Minister for Education, and some dearly departed former members and also former members. But it has been a journey of passing it on from one to the next. But it's time we put it on paper. And I agree with the Premier that standing orders should not be hurdles for any member. They should be to ensure the smooth operation of any parliament. And I think that we have the capacity to do that. For one reason or the other, I don't even remember the many times that we failed in it or didn't get to it, or the House ran out and the session of that House ran out and we never did get to it. We were going to engage the clerk from Barbados. Unfortunately, he passed away. Then we were going to engage the clerk from Trinidad. That never happened to help us. We brought people from Canada. I don't remember his name. And we did so much things. I believe once we unearth all those manifolders that we have, we may be able to get this done in short time. Especially before the end of the session. I think if there's one thing that would complete a tenure of 20 plus years for me, would be to see the operational part of this legislature be much smoother. Complete the 20 years, that's all I'm saying. After 20 years, it should have been, because I've spoken, Mr. Speaker, throughout the Commonwealth about the separation of powers, and especially Parliament from under the executive. There were times when I even got vilified in some countries because the executive didn't want to let go. I know my colleagues in Trinidad, they still have not finished it. They proposed it. I was there, Mr. Miller and I were there, remember, from Northside in 2010 on that same bandwagon. And I believe we must move like we did with the autonomy of this Parliament recently and the management thereof. We must move swiftly. We must, now that we have the momentum on additional autonomy, we must move swiftly. And this citation is just, I cannot claim that it is like stepping on the moon and they said one small step for man, one giant step for mankind. It might just be one small step for us as Caymanians, but it is one giant step for this Parliament to have more autonomy. It's a giant step, and those who come behind us will find that this road is not a paved road. It's the road less traveled. And there are tough times, and there are many pitfalls along the way, particularly when you make promises out on the road in your campaign and you come in here and find out that you can't do it. That is the greatest pitfall that I've found in 20 years. It's frustrating, and a lot of it has to do with the system that is antiquated, and it needs to be updated. Not only here in Parliament, but now that we have some separation and we can do it on our own, and the deputy governor has no more control other than sitting here, then we can do it on our own. And it's for the and I have always argued throughout the Commonwealth, Mr. Speaker, that is for the parliamentarian who has been duly democratically elected to make the decisions on the House of the people and for the House of the people. This is not a civil servant's house, nor is this the executive house. I trust that the public took note on Friday that that mace represents this house, the sovereignty, and the people, and the governor not party to one them. And that was put in a committee stage. No executive with veto power singularly can address any parliament with that mace in place and the legislature in session. So all the governor is doing is addressing the members. He could have done that up there on Truman Bodden Field. It would have been the same thing. Cannot address Parliament. Will never address Parliament. The only person that has ever come here and addressed Parliament has been Her Majesty the Queen. No one else will ever do that, other than the commoner like myself. That's the only legitimate representation that can address Parliament. This is the House of Commoners. That is why it's only $1,000 for anyone to put it up. You cannot have it so cost restrictive that it's out of the reach of the common man. That's precisely what it is. Or we would be going right back to the ages where the merchants would control. There must be some equality, but more importantly, the right to represent the people. And we cannot tell the people who to send here. That is what is unique about this. We must convince them that we are better and we are more capable than the other to represent their views. And in so doing, this Parliament and this one in particular must always maintain that integrity, the sanctity of Parliament must always be respected by all those who are sent here to represent their people. And the only way to do that is for the Parliament to have its say in how it is operated by the people, by the representatives who are sent to Parliament. And to do that, it's the standing orders and the management thereof under the members. Every member in here must be responsible for the management of this Parliament. That's why the people sent us here. Now that we have moved it from under the executive, in particular the deputy governor, we can now deal with what we have to deal with. Mr. Speaker, I didn't say the deputy governor wasn't anything derogatory about the deputy governor. It's just making sure everyone understands who was managing us here, who told us how much coffee to buy, how many reams of paper to go out for, how much water to serve the members, how many highlighters that we could buy. Now that responsibility lies squarely in the hands, and rightly so, of the members who make up this Parliament. And it excludes the Attorney General and the Deputy Governor. Well, not deliberately so, but they have no authority because they're an arm of the executive. They are no longer there. Well, they might be agents of the executive, but we are agents of the people, and the people expect us to run their house. I often say, and the Minister for Education often repeat, no one owns any real estate here. That real estate is owned by the people who put us here, and we operate at their pleasure. So, Mr. Speaker, to you and the Premier, I want to make my commitment that I'm ready to, let's get this thing done. Let's get it done as quickly as possible. It is the Premier that, Mr. Speaker, you will have to be trying to get the driver to bring here. You know I will come, but he will be dragged from one pillar to post, and so you need to ensure that he is properly and timely informed of our meetings. But I'm ready, and let us get it done. At least the three of us needs to meet at some stage so that we can formulate a process on getting this done. And there's no need for the Attorney General. If we need him from a legal perspective, then we will consult with him. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm ready. Let us get it done. Thank you, sir.
I am very pleased about the discussion on the standing orders, and as soon as the Premier can make himself available, we can do preliminaries till we get a bill to present to the House for their approval. Does any other member wish to speak? The member for Northside.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the bill before us, Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020. I too think it is timely and progressive, and I too support the necessary and many changes that need to be made to standing orders to make this institution function better. I would just draw the attention to the AG, the clause 1, where it talks about the commencement, but most of the other bills have by order in council, and based on what the Premier said about the urgency of it, we might want to put in there as soon as the governor signs it, or I don't know whether that's necessary or not, but we need to know when the commencement of the bill is. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. I think it is timely and look forward to the review of standing orders. Thank you.
Any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? I'll call now on the honorable move of the bill. Please write up.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank honorable members for the outpouring of support for this bill, and notwithstanding what the honorable leader of the opposition says, Mr. Speaker, I am willing and ready, when co-opted, to assist with the standing orders, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, yes. Always willing to assist, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just in reference to the observation from the honorable member from Northside, as it relates to clause 1 of the bill, what will happen here is that this bill will commence. Yes, sorry. The bill will come into effect once gazetted and gazetted. And the hope is that it will be gazetted tomorrow, all things being equal. So, I see the clerk nodded in acquiescence. Thank you. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank honorable members, and I, as I said, commend this bill to this honorable Parliament for passage.
Question is that a bill shortly entitled the Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020 has been given a second reading. The House will now proceed to committee stage to consider the bill. Please be seated. All right, you tell me when we get to it now then. See now. Before we read. Where? And as usual, we assume that as we would authorize the Attorney General to correct minor errors and such alike in this particular bill.
Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020, Clause 1, short title.
If there are no questions on Clause 1, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the ayes have it, and Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Clause 2, interpretation.
Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my apologies that I omitted to mention that there was a short committee stage amendment to Clause 2. And so, Mr. Chair, with your leave, I beg to move the following committee stage amendment, that the bill be amended in Clause 2 by deleting the definition of the word act and substituting definition as follows. Act means an act of the Parliament of the Cayman Islands, except where that reference was introduced into the laws of the islands prior to the commencement day, in which case, in that reference, act shall mean an act of Parliament of the United Kingdom, an act of England, or an act of Great Britain as applicable. So, Speaker, that just to clarify, in the United Kingdom, in Clause 2 of the bill, there's a reference there to act means an act of Parliament of the Cayman Islands, and so on, and it says act shall mean an act of the Parliament of Westminster, and such references to act of Parliament shall be referenced to acts of the United Kingdom Parliament. Just to clarify, Mr. Speaker, that it is much wider than act of Westminster Parliament. Some were enacted by English and Great Britain Parliament rather than just United Kingdom Westminster Parliament. So, for example, you find that there was a 1689 Bill of Rights, Mr. Speaker, that was enacted by, which is an act of England. And then there's a period 1707 to 1801 when there are acts of Great Britain, Mr. Speaker. And hence the clarification there.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does that also include those acts that were approved? Does this also include those acts that were approved by Jamaica, the Governor General of Jamaica?
Yeah.
For instance, the 1831 prescription law, 32.
The prescription law. We eventually amended that. We eventually renamed that a law.
To what?
I think we received the 1831 Prescription Act, and sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Honorable Attorney General,
yes, Mr.
you're
Speaker,
applying.
Mr. Chair, yes. So I think what the member is referring to, and I'm speaking at the top of my head now without the benefit of my notes, but I think what had happened is that initially we received the Prescription Act from Jamaica, and then eventually that morphed into the prescription law of the Cayman Islands. So somewhere along the line, we changed act to law. So we had our own prescription law.
No, it came in by website.
You have a copy of it?
Um, Of 1962. So it would apply to that as well, right? Because on that basis, that is where the
Genesis?
crown, the
Genesis.
queen, has authority to
Make order in council. Make
or
order in council.
right.
So this amendment would take that into account.
Okay. But you're saying that the 1832 Act on Prescriptive Rights has been morphed into the prescriptive law?
Somewhere along the line. Along the way, picked up the title law instead of act.
And the other question I did ask, how come BVI calls theirs Act? I don't know.
Different territory use different titles. Some, I think, Turks and Caicos call them, there's ordinance. Ordinance, yeah. I don't know about, you might be right, I don't know. But different territory use different nomenclature. Gibraltar's Act.
It says Virgin Islands, that must be ours, right? Legal Profession Act 2015. I don't understand the difference because I didn't become a lawyer through osmosis, you know? Close proximity, Tony. You don't see how far on are from me? Yeah. And your head just. Mr. Chairman, only through you, I just need to talk to the AG, please. I just wondered if there was they may have done a citation as well. Okay. Because I know they haven't gone as far in their autonomy as we have. You see? So, okay.
I know that the two of you really likes each other. Are you both satisfied that you have ventilated your thoughts?
I think so. I'm still no closer to where I wanted to be, but I shall acquiesce.
Question is that the amendment stand part of the clause. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause. Question now is that clause 2, as amended, stands part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 2, as amended, stands part of the bill.
Clause 3, style of legislation. Clause 4, amendment of enactments. Clause 5, amendment of subordinate laws.
Question is that clauses 3, 4, and 5 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Clauses 3, 4, and 5 now stands part of the bill.
A bill for a law to amend the laws with respect to the citation of laws consequential to the amendment of the Constitution and for incidental and connected purposes.
Question is that the title do now stands part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The title now stands part of the bill. That's it. Question is that the bill now be reported to the House. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The bill will be reported to the House. Please be seated. The House now resumes its business.
Report and bill, citation of acts of Parliament Bill 2020.
The Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to report that a bill entitled Citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020 has been considered by a committee of the whole House and passed with one amendment.
The bill has been duly reported and is set down for the third reading.
Third reading, suspension of Standing Order 47.
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to move the suspension of two standing orders. Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order that the business of the House may continue beyond the hour of interruption.
Question is that according to the Premier's time, it is 4:30. Question is that we suspend that the standing orders be suspended. Standing Order 10-2 in order for us to conduct business after 4:30. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The House now continues its business. Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 47 in order that a bill may be taken through 3 readings in the course of one day.
Question is standing order 47 be suspended in order for bills to go through all its stages. All in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Third reading.
Third reading, citation of Acts of Parliament Bill 2020.
The Honourable the Premier.
That's all right.
The Honourable the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill, a short title, Citation of Acts of Parliament, Bill 2020, be given a third reading and pass.
Question is that a bill shortly entitled the Citation of Acts of Parliament, Bill 2020, be given a third reading and passed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the ayes have it. The Citation of Acts of Parliament, Bill 2020, has been read a third time and is now passed.
First readings, the Legal Services Bill 2020.
The bill has been read the first time and is set down for the second reading.
Private Funding of Legal Services Bill 2020.
The bill has been deemed to have been read the first time and is set down for the second reading.
Registered Land Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill has been deemed to have been set down for the second reading.
Prescription Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time, set down for the second reading.
Virtual Asset Service Providers Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time and is now set down for the second reading.
Companies Amendment Number 3 Bill 2020.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time, is now set down for the second reading.
Property Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time and is set down now for the second reading.
Special Economic Zones Amendment Bill 2020.
Bill has been read a first time and is set down now for the second reading.
Healthcare Decisions Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
Penal Code Number 2 Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading. Honorable Premier. Oh, yeah. I didn't hear him, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated earlier, we really would like the bills which are passed subsequently to bear the title Act, and we therefore need to have the citation of Acts of Parliament Bill, which this House has now passed, assented to by His Excellency and gazetted. Hopefully, Mr. Speaker, all of that can be done tomorrow and that the business of the House can resume at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, which is the usual in any event, as Tuesday is the day when Cabinet is usually held. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I move the suspension of this Honorable House until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 9th. Sorry, not the suspension. I move the adjournment of this Honorable House until Wednesday, the 9th.
Thank you. The question is that this Honorable House to stand adjourned until Wednesday, the 9th of December, 10 a.m. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, the ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned until December the 9th.